Well, I'm joined now to discuss this by paediatric sleep consultant Rosie Davidson, who has signed the NSPCC letter that was sent to the government today to ban smacking. And we're also joined by Ciarán Kelly from Be Reasonable. He is against the ban. And thank you both for joining us on the programme tonight. We have been here before. This debate has been rumbling on for decades now. And Rosie, I'd be interested to know, what is new about this approach from the NSPCC, this letter? What's the change in tack to try and make this government rethink this issue?
I think really this issue has been rolling on for so long that we've got to the point where something has to change, something has to give. We know so much more about child development that there really is no argument against making change. It's the most reasonable, logical and evidence-based decision that we can make.
So you feel it'd be reasonable to ban smacking, you know, updated research, we know more about children's development. Ciarán, I mean, you know, your group is called Be Reasonable, and the argument is that reasonable punishment is okay for children. What do you think of what Rosie said there about the fact that we know more about the effect of smacking now?
Well, I think what you have to say, first of all, that this is, I'm sure this is very well-meaning, but what's being presented is rather misleading, it's somewhat misguided, because we know that the law already protects children. In fact, children rightly, because they're vulnerable, have greater protection in the law than adults, and that's as it should be. So what's being talked about here isn't really about protecting children. That is how it's been presented. I understand why people want to present it that way. But this is about, or what this would lead to, is the criminalisation of loving parents. That's what it's going to do. The law protects children, rightly so. So this is, by definition, going to deal with parents who are engaging only in the most trivial of actions and interactions with their children. It's going to outlaw what the law says is reasonable behaviour, which is very worrying. I think we should be concerned about the impact this is going to have in terms of family impacts from, you know, social services being involved with children, what the pressure that's going to put on social services, and you know, the detriment to people's career and the pressure that can bring. So this is not going to be something that is helpful for parents or for children.
Yeah, I'll put that point to Rosie about being misguided and criminalising parents. But just to be clear, Ciarán, what is reasonable punishment? So when we talk about smacking, what's okay in your eyes, just to be clear?
Well, it's what the law says is that anything that leaves a mark is unreasonable. So what you're talking about here, and I think most parents really understand what's involved in this, you're talking about sort of the mild tap on the back of the hands or the back of the legs. When Wales were looking at this is some other important examples, because I think people have the wrong idea in their head about what's involved here. When Wales were talking about what was going to be included in this, they used as examples, the Welsh government, parents picking up a tantruming toddler, you know, in the supermarket aisle and restraining them, or sort of trying to get them into their car seat when they're kind of unwilling to go. That would be classified as assault. And I think most reasonable parents, and parents know their children best and know how to parent their children best.
Yeah,
horrified at the prospect that such reasonable actions could be brought into the ambit of the criminal law.
Yeah, we've all been there with a toddler tantrum. Rosie, I just want you to pick up on what Ciarán said about you being misguided on this, and actually you're criminalising parents rather than protecting children. The Children's Act is there, it already protects children from harm.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that no mark doesn't mean no harm. So we need to be really careful about what we're talking about when we're talking about harming children. We know that restraining a child is not a criminal act. There are lots of cases where our children may be about to run into a road or do something dangerous and we need to restrain them. We don't need to smack them. It's very, very different. And let's face it, there haven't actually been a rise in prosecutions in Wales or Scotland who've banned it, and over 60 other countries across the world. Why are we so behind? Why are we pushing back so much on something that actually does protect children? It could protect children from violence in the home escalating. And if we can make changes on this level, then we're less likely to see further cases of abuse down the line.
Yeah, Ciarán, that's a good point. I mean, what excuse is there to use your hands to discipline a child? You know, it was pointed out in the video we showed before of the celebrities in Parliament Square, one of them saying, as an adult, you have more protection from physical harm than a child. In terms of disciplining children, there are other ways and means. And Rosie came out with something, quite compelling there. No mark doesn't necessarily mean no harm. We know how better adults are being protected now from things that we didn't speak about a couple of decades ago, things like stalking, coercive control. There are other harms there for adults that are being tackled, but this age-old harm for children is just, being let to continue.
Well, I think Rosie actually has put her finger on the problem that we're talking about here, because she said there, and she's involved with the campaign, but she said that, that a parent restraining a child wouldn't be caught by this. But of course, that's exactly the kind of behaviour that would be caught, because that would now be, or if the law were to change, would be classified as assault. It would. I mean, the Welsh government, who were ahead of the game on this, they did research. They said that. They were very open about that. In fact, they also said that having put time and effort into trying to find evidence of the harms of smacking, have stated on the public record, and people can look it up, that there was no evidence of harm being caused by smacking. Now, I think we need to...
just out of interest, what harm has been done by introducing a ban on smacking in Wales and Scotland? So
the figures from a year showed that 2,800 incidents of smacking were reported. So that might be 2,800 families. 1,500, that's to social services, 1,500 of those, nearly half, were investigated, and about 125 went down a prosecution route. Now, the population of Wales is about 3 million, population of England is about 60 million, crude figures, I know. But if you scale those up, what you're talking about is something getting on for 55, 56,000 reports of smacking, something like 30,000 social services investigations, and 2,500 prosecutions. Do we want the social services, who are, I think we would all agree, are pretty overstretched in the difficult job that they have to do, having essentially overnight another 30,000 things to investigate? Let's be very, very clear. It's incredibly important that genuine victims of abuse are looked after, and the perpetrators of that abuse are brought to book. But to put loving parents into the same camp as abusers is going to make it harder for the genuine victims to be helped.
Yeah, Rosie, you were shaking your head to a lot of that. Do you want to come back on some of those points that Ciarán's made?
Yeah, I think there's a huge point that we're missing here, which is that smacking doesn't teach our children anything. It teaches them, in fact, to mistrust their parents, who are the one person that should love them the most and care for them.
Rosie, how many people are actually smacking kids these days? In terms of, we talk about this being a generational thing. I grew up in the 80s. It wasn't hard to see in a supermarket or in the street a child being smacked on the back of their legs by their parents. But I can't even remember the last time I saw it. So, is this still a problem?
Well, we know that 85% of parents under 40 are against smacking, and that says something about the generational change, which is hopefully
So they're not doing it?
Well, hopefully not, and hopefully there's change coming and modernisation of how we parent and letting go of archaic, outdated punishments.
Ciarán, I'll put that to you. Are parents smacking their kids nowadays? Because you made the point that if children are being abused, a ban on smacking probably isn't going to help those children. There are more serious laws and more serious matters to be addressed there than, a ban on smacking.
Yeah, well, it's worse than that, isn't it? Because what I'm actually saying is not only is it not going to help them, it's going to hinder them, because if you give social services another 30,000 pieces of work to do, it's going to be harder to find the ones that they really need to be looking for. We know how many people are smacking now. I couldn't possibly say, but we do know that around about 80% of the adult population in Britain have said that their parents smack them. And the idea, I think most people find it pretty patronising at best to suggest that their parents are or we're abusing them. I think it's people have different ideas about how to parent their children. I am not advocating for smacking. The Be Reasonable campaign doesn't advocate for smacking. We simply say that to have a disagreement about different parenting techniques, and because you think parents should do it in a different way, it doesn't mean you should be sending the police round to their door.
OK, Ciarán, I'll give Rosie the last word to pick up on that point, because, you know, the majority of good parents know the difference between a reasonable punishment, a smack, a light tap, however you want to phrase it, and assaulting a child.
I think when it comes down to it, a smack tends to happen when parents have completely lost the ability to stay logical and focused, and they've lost their temper. And this means that we need better education and support for parents on how to handle these tricky situations with our children. We need help on how to tackle tricky toddler behaviour and other normal behaviour from children where they are pushing boundaries. We can still hold strong boundaries with our children, but we can do that in a loving, caring way where we're not resorting to physical violence, which has a long-term effect. It can increase aggression and anxiety long-term, and we have robust years and years of evidence to prove that. So I think that we need to really, really think closely and reflect. And it can be a painful experience for people to reflect on how they were treated as children. But we know that we can do better because we know better.
Rosie Davidson, paediatric sleep consultant, really appreciate your time. And Ciarán Kelly, spokesperson for the Be Reasonable campaign, really appreciate your time as part of this debate on smacking this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.